I'm from the second generation of environment journalists in this country. Floods won't happen or climate change is not happening.
The future might not even exist.
And we fight and we hit each other, get water and drink. Big watershed movement was the 1991 economic reforms. It wasn't easy to be an environment journalist those days. So nobody took us seriously. So they said, what is your secret,
Hello everybody, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Climapreneur Show. आज के एपिसोड पे हमारे साथ है गोपी सर, the managing editor at Mongabay-India. Mongabay is one of my also favorite platforms to read about stories all across India. मुझे सच में पसंद है Mongabay की stories बहुत ज़्यादा. And today to have him on the show is an absolute honor. And the kind of experiences that he brings with him genuinely very inspiring, and more than that, एक आपको नया dimension देता है वो सोचने के लिए. For example, equitable sharing, environmental economics and what other factors. I genuinely hope आपको आज का ये podcast पसंद आए. Please go do watch. And also we have recently launched Bharat Climate Startups. Go to Instagram and follow us on Bharat Climate Startups. आपको वाली stories भी बहुत पसंद आएगी. Now, over to you. I hope you all enjoy the episode.
Welcome, sir, on the Climapreneur Show. I am genuinely very excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Shweta. Looking forward to this conversation.
So, sir, sabse pehle let's start with tell me what Mongabay is and what work you do at Mongabay, because I feel that most of us have seen Mongabay on Instagram and we have admired stories that you guys share.
Mongabay is actually started as a blog personal blog of our founder. His name is Red Butler. It started 25 years ago. He had done a picture book on rainforests in Malaysia, so he was interested in rainforests. So he had done a picture book. But then what happened is when it came for publication, the publisher said, there isn't enough resource for publishing in color, and Red said, oh, this, then the whole purpose is lost. So he turned that entire material into digital space. And from there he started, the idea of Mongabay started, and Mongabay is the name of a bay in Madagascar. And he started, so he ran, first many years Mongabay ran as just a personal blog where he used to put out information and put out news stories, etc. And in 2012 he registered Mongabay as a NGO in the US. And he started bureaus in multiple locations. Indonesia was the first where he started a bureau because of Indonesian forests and coverage on Indonesian forests. Then Indonesia writes in Bahasa and mostly in Bahasa. And then it was a bureau in Latin America, which does Portuguese and Spanish. The third bureau was in India. So 2017, two of us, my colleague Sandhya and I, were hired to start Mongabay-India. And we started Mongabay-India in 2017. Our first launch was in 2018. January we launched, and we have been here for 6 years now. And we have been doing our work where the whole idea is to look at environment and conservation. So what we have done is we have gone beyond what Mongabay Global does, because we have sort of tweaked it a little for Indian audience. So we also do a lot of environment coverage. So we have environment and development. So, but our main thrust is on mainstreaming biodiversity. So right. That's what we sort of want to look at biodiversity, how it has implications in all other areas of environment and conservation, climate change, politics, in economics. So that's where we are at. We publish every day, 5 days of a week, 2 stories in English and 1 in Hindi. So we do around 15 stories a week. And these stories are text stories. They are short video stories, long video stories, podcasts, multiple media. So that's where we have been in the last 6 years. People have accepted us.
That's very interesting to know, and we'll also come back to that, how biodiversity, has implications on politics, has implications on economics. But before that, sir, this was your story with Mongabay. But usse pehle, what was your journey? Where did you start from? Where did you get this interest into environmental journalism?
I am Shweta. I'm a bit too much of an old time environment.
How old are you?
In public, you want me to say that in public? Okay, I'm rather old. I think let's keep it like that. Okay. Now the point is, I'm from the second generation of environment journalists in this country. So if you look at the first generation, people whom I look to for my inspiration, people like Daryl DeMonte, Claude Alvarez, Bitu Sehgal,
Yes.
Shadai, so these were the first generation of Anil Agarwal, Sunita Narayan. I mean, these were the first generation of environment journalists. My generation is the second generation, and I have been working in this field from 1987 onwards. So much before my colleagues were born, I think, and perhaps you were born. Yeah. So so I've been. This is my 37th year in this line of work, and I have sort of worked in multiple sides of environment and development communication. Both in journalism, I worked in a business newspaper. I worked with Down to Earth magazine. Now I am the editorial lead for Mongabay-India. I have trained environment journalists in South Asian region. I have worked for international agriculture research organizations in India and in Africa, and worked for national level NGOs. So covered a lot of ground in this area. So I have actually seen environment journalism grow in India, I can say, because I was actively involved since the late 1980s. So I've seen this area grow, and it certainly was not the same as what it's today. Today there are a lot of environment journalists, but it was not so encouraging at the times when we started working. So I've seen a whole.
So when you say it wasn't encouraging at that point of time, please share that time. What was it, and how has the space today evolved? Because today, when we see, we are seeing, of course, there are some solid portals like Mongabay, and then there is also Down to Earth. Then there are also a new form of creators coming in. When we talk about platforms like Instagram and other platforms. So I want to really understand from you that what were the challenges back then, and how has the space today evolved, say specifically in India?
So when I started working, it was 1987, and that was the time when we were dreaming of a new India, and a lot of statistics had become important in the Indian political and economic space. Big watershed movement was the 1991 economic reforms. And so from 93 to 2002, I was working in a business newspaper, the Hindu Business Line, and I was writing on environment. And in those days, it was where journalists wanted to be talking about growth, economic growth, and environment was not seen as something as something that is supporting growth. Though it was supporting growth even then, but it was not seen like that, and that made it difficult for us, because it wasn't easy to be an environment journalist those days, unlike what it is today. I mean, today environment journalism has evolved as an accepted field of journalism, and young people want to be environment journalists. Like you took your inspiration to be wanting to be an environment journalist. So and young people want to be environment journalists, but that was not the time. So I mean, we are here today because we pushed those days. We sort of stuck to our guns, and stuck to our passion. So some of my colleagues who couldn't sort of withstand that kind of pressure left environment journalism, went on to other line of work. But so that's how it was in the 1990s. I think the couple of things happened which was very important, how environment journalism became important. In 1990s, when we said that, when we used to say, don't build in Pallikarnai Marsh in Chennai, for instance. And that's the time when the southern Chennai neighborhoods were growing. So nobody took us seriously. If we don't build in Pallikarnai Marsh, where else will we build? And that entire tidal park and that infrastructure came in the Pallikarnai Marsh. But then the 2015 floods happened. Devastating floods in Chennai happened. And then, everybody realized that it wasn't sensible to build in the Palikali marsh. So I think partly it's environment journalism has become a go-to field for young people, partly because more and more people are aware and people want to conserve the environment. That's point number one. And partly it's because nature has taught everybody fairly bad lessons. So you can't be an editor of a publication in Chennai or Bombay and then say floods won't happen or climate change is not happening. So times have changed now. There's a lot of nuance in environmental journalism, whereas when we were doing it, there wasn't so much of nuance. So it also becomes even more. There's a greater need for responsibility today, also, so that you don't destroy the field that has taken so much of time to be grown.
Like the way you mentioned about the floods in Chennai which happened, do you have like more experiences of this kind? That because generally when we this is also an example that if today also we don't commit the same mistakes, the future might not even exist because we have moved beyond that needle of worse. So do you have more examples? And also I also read this specific post that you did that in old times when you used to travel via train, so the train used to travel all the way up to the west coast and come from the east coast. I think Chennai to Mumbai was the route. So please talk about this, and also if you have any more experiences like this.
Yeah, so one example which I want to share is, going back to trains, something which I really like talking about is the time when I used to travel from Thrissur, my hometown, which is now a home city, Thrissur in Kerala, to Delhi to work. And this was in late 1980s, and the train journey would be around 53 hours. And then those were the days before you got these plastic water bottles at 20 rupees. It wasn't available those days. So we all carried our water bottles,
the Milton bottles which used to be there,
which we used to take to school.
Schools, yeah.
Remember the one with the straw?
Okay,
yeah, those kind of bottles. We used to carry that 1 liter bottles, and as the train moves into the station, we would all jump out of the compartments, go to there would be around 10 drinking water taps, and we fight and we hit each other, jab, and get water and drink, and that water has to last till the next station, perhaps maybe even the station after that, But what the biggest lesson there was, I can still tell you that the water in Vijayawada is quite nice tasting. Water in Balasha is brackish. So I had an experience, by the very fact of collecting water, we understood what the local environment was. So why is water in Balasha brackish? Then you start that questioning process, Why is water in Vijayawada good? Krishna flows. It's Krishna water, so it's good water. So you have that you were in touch with your environment. Now what happened? And it didn't take, it wasn't very, by 1992-93, I remember in Chennai, they had started supplying water in 20-liter canisters. And by early, before mid-90s, water was available in trains at 20 rupees or whatever, and you could buy those water bottles. But once you have that water bottle, you have lost your connectivity with your outside environment. Water is available to you at a cost that is affordable, and it comes to you. You don't have to go fight, get a jab on your ribs, etc. And that water is available. You have lost a touch with the environment, and that is what is a major issue with that is happening to us city dwellers, because we are losing an idea of what is the ecological footprint of our actions. I can give you a personal example. I used to live in Chennai for multiple years, and then I moved from Chennai to a smaller city called Thrissur. And in Thrissur, I have an independent house, and in the outskirts of the city. Now, I am far more aware of garbage disposal and the loops in Thrissur, because I am part of that loop. I have to compose my own waste, and so I have to be part of that loop. Whereas in Chennai, I didn't care. But see, the point is, millions of people in Chennai don't care about where their garbage goes. But do you know, a city like Chennai gets 5,400 tons of garbage every day. So if we are having this conversation tomorrow, 5,400 tons of garbage would have gone into the landfill. The story would be same in Delhi. I'm sure the story is same in Bombay. So the fact is, much of the environmental problems are happening because we have lost track of our footprint. We don't know what are the consequences of our action. We want our comfort. We are happy to pay a little more for something, but we are losing track of our ecological footprint. So I think that's one of these areas of transition, and through our journalism that we do, we try to bring that ecological footprint back into the consciousness.
I also feel that, just to adding to your point, we also lose that in-depth experiences. Like, for example, say I have been born and brought up in Delhi, and my co-founder comes from Assam, and our experiences are completely different. Like, I sometimes do feel like jealous that, okay, you have, like, he tells me all these different stories of being at so many different train stations, traveling to, like Majuli and all these places. And I never had those experiences. So my experiences were very limited in terms. So I also feel that somewhere we also lose the depth of it. And like, this is one of the reasons why we started Bharat Climate Startups. And that's why I primarily focus towards tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Because I also feel the same thing, that once you feel the experiences, once you see what's happening, then consciousness also increases, and then subsequently action also happens. So that's pretty interesting. Also, like, do you have any more experiences, like from your expeditions? I have heard that you have been to Nilgiri, right? So what was your experience there? Your observations there?
Nilgiris is quite funny because I studied in the Nilgiris. I went to school in the Nilgiris. So I went to school in the Nilgiris from 1977 to 1982, and I returned to Nilgiris for the first time professionally in the year 1993. Then I continued returning to Nilgiris, writing about Nilgiris, reporting from Nilgiris, and then now I commission stories on Nilgiris. So very, very interesting transition that happens from the time we were there. So I think the major difference that has happened in Nilgiris, and not just Nilgiris, but in all parts, all mountains, all hill stations in the country, is that it's not. It's open to everybody now. Which is very good at one level, because it's no longer the preserve of the rich and famous alone. Why should the good air of Nilgiris be enjoyed only by the rich and famous? So in that sense, it's very egalitarian. Everybody can go to Nilgiris. You can take your motorcycle and ride up to Nilgiris, or you can drive your car up to Nilgiris. That's the good side of it. But the bad side of it is, the hills are now, almost all the hills are now taking far more than what they can handle. I'll give you statistics of Nilgiris. Nilgiris, the 1991, 2001 and 2011 census, the district population has more or less stayed same, at around 7.5 lakhs kind of population. But what the number of people who have been coming is multiple times, in millions, so the population that comes from outside, which has no roots in that sense, in the sense that they come, they don't care what is happening there, and they go away. Now the point is, sociologically, it's something very good. More and more people are coming, but is it very good ecologically? That's a question that we have with most of the hill stations that we have. So if, it's like Tracy Chapman, singing "You Got a Fast Car" and let's go. But now everybody has a fast car, So the end result of all the fast cars are mountains are facing the brunt of it. Look what is happening to Ladakh and Leh, where after one movie did so much of a difference. The tourism industry boomed in those areas after one movie, and then it's all fine. Why shouldn't people go? People should go, but then there has to be some kind of a system in which it sort of doesn't go beyond the tipping point, because problem in all this is, once you go beyond a tipping point, you don't even know what is the trajectory that it's going to take, and that is a problem. I can tell you specifically, in the Nilgiris, in late 70s, early 80s, we never saw bison on the upper plateau. Now you see a lot of bison on the upper plateau. Now, why is it happening? We ran, Mongabay-India ran a story on it, and multiple reasons, but one reason is the upper plateau is becoming warmer. Is becoming warmer because of too much of, too many people living there and too many people staying there, and, too many people moving in. And when the upper plateau becomes warmer, why do people go to the Nilgiris? It is 7,000 feet high, and 7,000 feet makes this a temperate island in a tropical latitudes. Now, if that is going to disappear.
Similarly, you also wrote about Kashmir, that, while we saw Snowless Kashmir, but more than the tourist, it also has implications on the agriculture. Please, sir, talk about it.
I remember Dr. Swaminathan, who's no more, MS Swaminathan, who was the agriculture scientist, talking at one point of time in the 1990s, and those days climate change discussions had not got into so much of depth, but so he was talking about it, and he was talking about how for wheat, and he should know, he's India's eminent agriculture scientist, he says for wheat flowering, that time window when a certain temperature has to be there is very important. Now, when those things change, so when you don't have snow, that means there hasn't been enough precipitation, or the temperature is not what it should be on a particular part of the year, then what is the impact of that on downstream agriculture? Because the Gangetic Plain, which is our main granary, is just below the Himalayas. What will be the impact of less snow in the flow of Himalayan rivers? Not all the water in Himalayan rivers come from snowmelt, but a good percentage of what water comes from the snowmelt. So what happens to that? And if glaciers were to melt, they would form glacial lakes. And what is the risk of glacial lake outburst floods, like the one which we had in Sikkim in September we had that. So what would be the risk of all this? So there are a lot of, these are all fairly complex and fairly interrelated areas, and changes in one, you don't know what changes it has in multiple areas. So for India, when it comes to agriculture, the Gangetic belt, if you have a change in temperature, the growing area goes northwards. Would we have the benefit of the Gangetic belt? No. So these are the kind of questions that all these climate change discussions sort of lead to. I don't know whether answers are available to all the questions, but then these are the questions that come out, and our job as journalists is to at least bring out these questions.
Do you have any stories from Lakshyadeep? Like right now, Lakshyadeep is also seeing like a boom in tourism, and we don't know how it's going to turn out. So do you have any stories there from the past or anything?
I haven't personally traveled to Lakshyadeep. We have carried reports in Mongabay-India from people who have done a lot of work in Lakshyadeep. So people who have studied Lakshyadeep for decades, so they have written for us in Mongabay-India. But from all that I heard because Kerala is quite close to Lakshyadeep, and travelers, people from Lakshyadeep do come to Kerala, and we do have opportunity to talk with them. From what I understand about these islands they are very, they're not very high from the sea level. They are like 1-2 meters above sea level kind of islands. Two, they're mainly coral islands, like they have coral reefs, and their fisheries has been the main source of livelihood for the local population, and it's mainly from the fish associated with the coral reefs, and they do go out into the sea and fish. So now, if you have a large scale development, can those islands take that kind of large scale development is a question that has as yet been unanswered, and these are bit dangerous to say abhi kar lo baad mein dekha jayega. These are things that have to be studied, and So here again, the same issue like in any other place. I mean, development is necessary, but then how much development at what pace, and that has to be really thought through and done. Because we know of, like the idea is to open up tourism, and we know from other locations, destinations, what happens with uncontrolled tourism. So the idea is it's early days. You can prevent that from happening with little bit of thought.
And similarly, sir, I also saw this one story that you posted. It was on the wild pigs of Andaman Islands are of great significance to the diet of indigenous Jarawa tribes. Please expand on that.
Yeah, actually, that's a story somebody else had done. I sort of heard of this particular species only when after the pitch came, and then I read the story, and because some of the tribes of Andamans, they're among the. I mean, now this is borne out by research by anthropologists. They are among the oldest people who migrated out of Africa into the Asian continent. So, and some of them have not had much contact with the outside world, and so for them that their access to local biodiversity, local natural resources, their habits, their traditions are important. I mean, in addition to support from modern medicine and modern education, whatever. So to understand that they have a particular kind of pig which is of importance for their nutrition, and there are efforts to sort of breed that pig, captive breed that. So I mean that's an interesting story. I mean, I thought it was an interesting story, and that's why we carried that in Mongabay-India, and so that's what we want to look at. Some of these things which are otherwise, I mean, most of us. I've been in this environment field for some time, but I wasn't aware that there is a particular I won't say species, perhaps particular kind of pig which we weren't aware of. So that's very relevant for that population. And how do you conserve that? How do you sort of grow the numbers without without having problems with their so that's what interested us to that story. So I'm happy that you like that story.
We'll do a little exercise before we move to environmental economics. Of course, we want to talk to you about that. I'm going to give you names of some random I'm going to give you names of states of India, and if you have a story to share from that state or any experiences, please share. If you don't have, just say pass, and let's see how many states can you cover, because you have got such in-depth experience. Okay, so one of my personal favorite states. Let's start from Assam.
Assam, we have done a story on the Majuli Islands and Kasiranga, and a couple of things on how the island dynamics changes every year, and also on post insurgency, how poachers became conservators. So we have done the
poachers became conservators.
Yes.
Wow.
Conservators, yes. So we have reported stories from Assam. So that's something. And Hulok gibbons, are they from Assam? Hulok gibbons stories, those very interesting. So this what I know about Assam. Yeah.
Okay, next state would be Chhattisgarh.
Chhattisgarh. Okay, I won't say I was born in Chhattisgarh, but I had my initial years in Chhattisgarh. My father was posted those days in Madhya Pradesh government, and I spent 8 years in Raipur and Bhilai. So the economics of iron ore, the steel plant, and what impact the steel plant has on the environment of the region, and how in a place like Chhattisgarh, which is a predominantly tribal state, how people from outside have changed the economics and the political narrative of the state, etc. So this is something which is of interest to us.
Gujarat,
we have done some work on Kutch. We have done some stories on Ajrak printing, and how Ajrak dyeing and that, and we've done some stories on mangroves of Kutch.
Share about mangroves of Kutch.
We did 2 stories. Actually, it was very interesting. We did a story on mangroves and how the mangrove conservation work in Kutch is of relevance, and we also did a story on the wild ass of Narayan Sarovar. So this mangrove story was interesting because how that's of importance, because actually Gujarat has huge amount of mangroves, very large tracts with mangroves. So the interesting story is the person who went to do that story, one of our contributors called Ravleen, she got so excited by what she saw, she did a second story on how people are working and villagers are working to conserve these mangroves, So there was a story which came out of a story,
Can you give me one way how these villagers are working to conserve mangroves?
Villagers they have realized the importance of mangroves. I think it's a bit preposterous for me to say they have realized. They were always aware, but they sort of now see the importance more with so much. So they're working more to conserve the mangroves. So with little support from outside the government, etc. So Gujarat.
That's amazing to see. That's how local communities play a role. I think that's when people talk about indigenous knowledge that we have within India, and how we should be looking forward to create indigenized solutions and not one solution that fits all.
Yes. I'll give you an example. This will be very interesting because, in Kerala, the Western Ghats comes like that, and there's a break. There's a small pass called Shegota Pass, and then you have a set of mountains, and that's the last bit of mountains that's called the Agasthyamala Mountains, Agasthyamala Hills. And there's an indigenous community called the Kani tribals. Now there's an institution called, it used to be those days called Tropical Botanical Gardens Research Institute. Now it's got a slightly different name, but TBGRI. Now the TBGRI ethnobotanists used to go out to the field to collect samples in the forest that the Kani tribals knew. So the Kani elders would be their guides. Okay. Now this happened in the 1990s. Now they would go to the field, and when they climbed, these scientists are huffing and puffing, and these elders who are older than them, they would walk up the mountains and they're not huffing. So they said, what is your secret? So what they realized was before they traveled, these tribals would take a root or a stem, I'm not very sure, of a particular plant, and put it into the mouth and keep chewing it. And then they got the TBGRI scientists took this, worked on the active ingredient, and realized that this has an active ingredient which gives energy. So that's where, and they work with a company and farm Ayurveda medicine company, and to develop a model, to develop a drug out of it called Arogya Pacha, and that part of the money and the benefits went back to the tribals. Okay, so this was in India one of the earliest models of benefit sharing of biodiversity. So this is something that happened from indigenous knowledge. So if this was not documented, it may have perhaps.
So do you feel a lot of times people say that indigenous knowledge or indigenous solutions are not scalable? Like, I personally don't believe it, because I feel that that's why that solution is for that specific area. What are your thoughts? Do you feel that that's there?
Some solutions are not necessarily scalable because it is happening in a particular, like how much of Arogya Pacha would Agasthyamala Hills yield, or do you turn the whole Agasthyamala Hills into Arogya Pacha nurseries? That perhaps is not an answer, but then the fact that you have, you realize that Arogya Pacha gives this kind of benefit. That's where where you look at, where companies would look at the molecule and then they say how can that be synthesized, and how can that be. Breakthroughs in science have happened because people have synthesized molecules which existed in nature. Quinine or anti-malarial drug, breakthrough happened when anti-malarial drug was synthesized industrially, because naturally the anti-malarial drug is not enough to supply, stop malaria. Similarly, the Onge tribals in 1990s, mid-90s, I did a story of Onge tribals in Andamans. They had access to a botanical which they could sort of drink. They could I don't know what was the main, they chewed or whatever that was, which protected them from malaria. And the malaria that they were exposed to was not our malaria. They were exposed to cerebral malaria. Cerebral malaria even more dangerous than our malaria, you know. So then the question becomes, okay, you do that, you take that knowledge, you develop a drug out of it, but then what is most important? How do you transfer the benefit of that to these communities? You know, because as long as that feedback loop is not there, it's not fair. Fairness and equity has to be built into these kind of. So you could take traditional knowledge. By itself, it may not be in a sense scalable, but you can go into the depth of it and then find the active ingredient, make it scalable, then transfer the commercial benefits plow it back into the community. Then there is benefit for the community. Otherwise, it's just benefit for the company that is manufacturing the drug out of it, you know. So that bit is very important. So that's why the third element of the Biodiversity Act or the convention, equitable sharing of benefits, that's very important, which usually gets neglected. You talk of conserving biodiversity, you talk of sustainable use, but you really don't always talk about the equitable sharing. That is very, very important.
That's very, I'm thinking about equitable sharing. This has never occurred that this could also exist. So that's very important, and what you said is making so much sense. My next state for you would be Bihar.
Bihar.
You don't have to say pass. I'm sure you have something.
I've been to Bihar. I've traveled not very much, but in Gaya and both Gaya, etc. And the agriculture system and also the flood, how they work with the flooding, river flooding and the annual cycles, and how they sort of continue with the agriculture system. Some of the rivers that flow from Nepal basically into Bihar, Kosi, Gantak, etc. They flood almost every year. So they have an annual cycle. So the communities that live in the banks of those rivers have sort of worked out a rhythm, which is a rhythm which goes along with the flooding of the rivers, you know. So and make use of the maximum use of the flooding for their agriculture, etc. You know, because flooding can damage standing crops, but post flooding it also makes soil nutritious, which most people forget, you know, because if you were to sort of work your agriculture into that cycle, you can benefit from the flooding and minimize drought, you know, minimize damage to your system. So how communities in Bihar have sort of worked with that. So that's something of interest.
That's very smart, you know, because if flooding is happening, then how do they use the post-flooding thing to actually enrich their soil? I haven't heard about this,
What does a flood bring? A flood brings soil. You know,
the water has a lot of minerals, matter, yeah.
Organic matter from the upper reaches to the lower reaches. That's what a flood does, no? And when the flood recedes, this is deposited in the lower reaches because it can't flow beyond that, or the water stagnates there. And because the water stagnated, flood has happened. And when water stagnates, sediments go down. So that makes soil richer. Nutrition, so that is more nutrition and more nutrient, organic nutrient for cultivation. I mean, how did a civilization like Egypt, have 5,000 years of settled agriculture? It's because they made use of the flooding of the Nile. Nile brought so much of water. How does Assam do it? Assam does the same thing. Makes use of Brahmaputra's flooding cycles. Live with the flooding cycle of Brahmaputra, and you tune your life to the cycle of Brahmaputra flooding. Godavari floods every year, so that entire region in east and west Godavari, they're used to that flooding cycle. They work on the flooding cycle, and so the crops that they use traditionally would be crops that have a cycle which coincides with the flooding cycle. So you won't have a standing crop when it's flooding. Your sowing will start after the flood is over. So two ways now these systems are getting hit. One is climate change is changing your entire flooding, drought, whatever, entire cycle, your entire monsoonal cycle, because that's not reliable any longer. In Kerala, rains used to start on 1st June. Now it starts in 1st August, or if it starts, and then you have heavy rains. Yeah, so that is number one. And actually even before that, the green revolution technologies, where we went in for a different kind of varieties, which yielded more, but those varieties need not necessarily have the same flexibility of these the traditional cropping varieties. So that's how these communities have got hit in both ways. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about Manipur? It's a pass.
I mean, we haven't done. I can't even think of any. I mean, we did some stories on rat hole mining. These coal mines, but I'm not sure whether it's Manipur or any other state. But from one of the northeast states, how these small people, informal. It's in many places it's even illegal to do family level mining, and you bring out coal and it happens in some parts of. I'm not sure whether it's Manipur because my colleague had done stories, but this rat hole mine workers helped in this recent case in Uttarakhand when these guys were
stuck inside. Yes. But I didn't know about how the rat hole mining people.
So it was basically the people who had who were traditionally well adept with rat hole mining. These are the people who worked.
So what was the story? Please tell how these people helped in Uttarakhand.
No, the story was about the trials and tribulations and the challenges faced by the rat hole miners, because their livelihoods are associated. I'm not sure whether it's Manipur or any other.
How these rat hole miners helped, get the people out from the tunnel.
Yeah. So people who knew that the technology on how to sort of build these tunnels, without too much of equipment. If you had followed that development, we had good big equipment going there, but the equipment getting stuck and equipment not making progress. And it's the rat hole miners who actually dug their way through that block and reached out to the people and rescued them. So the technology that they had been using for what was quote unquote illegal mining was what came in handy to save lives in Uttarakhand. So rat hole mining is what I can think of.
It seems like to me that these people, we spoke about so many states, these people are our heroes, there are indigenous heroes, indigenous entrepreneurs, indigenous solution providers, whatever name we give them, because such amazing, solutions they are developing.
Yes, there are lots of it. There's lots of it. The whole strength, and I think that's where, you and I have a role, is to sort of bring out these stories, not romanticize it. Because there also we are doing disservice if we romanticize it and but give it the due importance, appropriate due importance, neutral mind, and say that these are areas where there are possibilities, and these are areas where people have worked in the past to deal with climate change, and these are areas which could be used for future climate change. For instance, this tradition we have of sacred groves. 2017 was a year of a drought in South India, and I traveled to 4 major places to do detailed stories on sacred groves. Northern Kerala, Nilgiris, Koli Hills, and Kodagu. And I realized how these people how the sacred groves were giving climate resilience to these people to local communities during drought. Now, the idea of sacred groves is perhaps not doesn't get the same importance in the larger. But if sacred groves were given importance, then they can provide communities with climate resilience in future when climate change is happening. No? Because how do you deal with climate change? See, if I were to tell you 20 साल के बाद ये हो जाएगा, 20 साल देखा जाएगा, But the point is, if I were to tell you आज के ठंड के लिए what is it that you can do? So if I can help you deal with today's climate variability, I am helping you to cope with future climate change. So now if I can see that a sacred grove can help communities deal with today's climate variability, then the same sacred groves can help communities deal with future climate change. So that's the knowledge we can get from all the traditional wisdom that's there, and we can use it to deal with future climate change without romanticizing it. So we should neither romanticize it too much nor dismiss it. So both are dangerous. So giving it that due importance, and where something can be researched and backed up scientifically, fabulous.
I heard this thing about in a research paper, of course, on climate change storytelling. So that said that when you talk with too much fear, it paralyzes people. And when we talk about, say, with too much hope, it gives people that feeling that, okay, someone is going to solve it. So there has to be a balance, and this echoes with what you are telling, that don't romanticize this thing.
That's what we try to do, and that's what we sort of, if you were to join in one of our team calls in Mongabay-India, when we will discuss story ideas, you'll realize this our weekly exercise. When we look at story ideas, we don't want to necessarily do stories because people feel romantic and say, oh, tribals have the answers for everything, which is not true. If the indigenous communities had answers for everything, neither is it true that they don't have any answers. So how do you identify the right answers? How do you sort of give them enough importance? How do you get other people to give? Because the role we play is of a multiplier agency. I don't know how many people read Mongabay-India, but then the point is, I would like to feel that people read Mongabay-India, and the stories we write has an impact with them, that has a replay with them.
That is really, I want to cover all the states of India to see how many experiences you have, but probably we'll also have you for a round 2 of this podcast. But sir, now moving forward to environment economics. What is it, and why is it important to even talk about it today?
Environmental economics. See, I'm a journalist from a generation. I don't know whether you have heard the story of Silent Valley. Silent Valley. You've heard of Silent Valley. Silent Valley is a valley in Kerala, which has rainforest. It's a small valley, but very good rainforest. And there, a hydroelectric project was to be built in late 1970s. They were talking about it, and it raised a major controversy, and then it went into a lot of discussion. And at one stage, when Indira Gandhi was Prime Minister, she said, no, we will not have the... She went through, it wasn't as if she just said, no, we won't have the hydroelectric. She went through a lot of process and weighed pros and cons and said, we won't have the hydroelectric project, and converted that into a national park. Now, I am from a generation, and I think people of environment journalists of my generation are those who have sort of started our life, reading about Silent Valley. The reporting those days was done by Daryl and people like that. So Silent Valley was a major milestone in, but Indira Gandhi took a position that we should not have this project. Okay, you can argue that perhaps Indira Gandhi had a love of environment, so she took that position. But the point is, even she went through a rigorous scientific process. There was an M.G. Menon committee which went through that rigorous process to come to it. The question there for us then becomes, how do you convince a policy maker? Because when somebody wants to make a hydroelectric project, let's continue with the same example of Silent Valley. Somebody wants to, and you are the chief minister, and people come to you and advise you, or you're the prime minister, and people come and advise you and say, sir, madam, if we have this thing, we will get benefit of so many megawatts of power. This will reduce an energy problem here. This will ensure that so many industrial clusters can come up, etc. So people will convince you about the benefits, economic benefits of the utility of that area. But nobody would tell you that if we were to let that rainforest survive without damming it and submerging it under a reservoir, that rainforest will give you X, Y, Z benefits over the years, sustainably. And these benefits may die after, let's say, 30 years, 40 years. These benefits will continue for generations together. So that is the area of environmental economics, where you look at what are the economic benefits of conserving natural resources. Now, this discipline itself is not very old. I mean, this discipline itself is a post Second World War, discipline. So that's where science is happening. But science can happen, and in India and in South Asia, environmental economics have developed and they've done fairly good work. But they talk to each other in conferences like the INSEE conference, or they talk to each other. They talk to each other in journals. But how does this reach the larger public? And how does it become part of a discourse where tomorrow, when a question comes up like Silent Valley comes up, it's natural that people say, but if you keep the forest, it will have XYZ benefit. So when it becomes almost a default option to consider the economic value of that, so how can that happen? And that's where I mean, personally, because this has been a bit of my personal, drive on it. So that's where Mongabay-India, we have been trying to work with environmental economists and sort of get more of environmental economics research into the media space and into the public domain, and hopefully into the policy space, and that's what we are trying to do. And we have been working with the Indian Society for Ecological Economists. We've been organizing trainings for journalists, and we are participating in their conference, talking with researchers how you can bring it to the media and then to the public space. Ultimately, this has to become a public discourse. It has to become part of a public discourse, and that's where the challenge is, and that's where we are into.
I really like the way, you're bringing all the key stakeholders, be it researchers, be it, different institutions who have been working. That has also been our, we have tried to always incorporate, research institutions, education institutions, because I feel a lot of work is happening there. They have got a lot of insights. And if this goes out, a lot of significant change can be, created. So kudos to you, sir. Kudos for, doing this so well, and for all the experiences that you share today. It genuinely means a lot. I really want this conversation to just keep going, but we'll have you for a part 2 of the show. And thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you, sir.